All right, so this is about more woke politicians. This guy right here is Scott McLaughlin, sentenced to death in 2006 for murder and rape. This is also Scott McLaughlin, the transgender female named Amber, when he was in prison. So I can't help but wonder if the politicians who were begging for clemency for Amber would have still been begging for clemency if Amber remained Scott. My guess is no, but because of the world we live in and the LGBT movement, all the woke politicians have to jump on board with it and have their voices heard so they get all the support and the votes from that group of people. Squad member Cori Bush, we all know her. She was one of the biggest defund the police politicians out there. And then she went on to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on private security. You know who she is. She was begging for clemency for Scott. She did not think that Scott should be put to death for raping and murdering his partner, a woman, back in 2003. She wrote to the local politicians. She wrote to the governor. She begged Joe Biden, please save him. He is mentally ill. Really? He's mentally ill? Haven't we been saying that all along? Yes, for Scott to think he's Amber, yeah, he has a mental illness. But Cori Bush, supposedly an ordained minister, she wrote that she believes accountability, but also the sanctity of life, and do not think these tenets are mutually exclusive. So she's not okay with Scott raping and murdering someone, but she's also not okay with Scott being given the death penalty for such a horrific crime. I'm lost on that one. She went on to say it's not about justice. It's about who has institutional power and who doesn't. And I urge you to correct these injustices using every tool available, including the power to grant clemency. And they gathered over 6,000 signatures, I'm assuming from the LGBT movement, which is fine, but it didn't work. On Twitter, Bush posted on December 27th, she stated that this is her belief. The death penalty is cruel, barbaric, and inhumane. Yes, it is, but I believe in the death penalty for certain crimes. So if you're convicted of brutally raping and murdering someone, it's my opinion that the death penalty is warranted. And no, it's not an eye for an eye. It's why should the taxpayers of states pay to institutionalize someone far into their life, 50s, 70s, 90s? Why should the taxpayers have to shoulder that burden to keep a convicted murderer alive? I don't believe that should happen. I believe that the death penalty is there for certain crimes. Okay, but Cori Bush can't understand that. I don't understand how do you believe that Scott, aka Amber, how can you believe that he has a mental illness? Because he claims his childhood was traumatic. Millions of people have traumatic childhoods. They don't go on to rape and murder people. So you say he's mentally ill? That's a strong possibility because, as I've always said, if you're a man and you think you're a woman, you have some kind of mental deficit. There's something going on that is just not right, because we all know that men cannot be women. McLaughlin's lawyer goes on to cite that traumatic childhood and mental health issues that the jury never heard about. Well, why don't these politicians and attorneys, why don't they speak of and push for mental health counseling for these people who think they're another gender when they're not? They're not doing that, and they never will do that. But what they will do is push for it when it's a situation like this. Scott was convicted in 2003 was sentenced to death in '06. I don't know why it took so long. I'm assuming appeals. And he was recently put to death by execution. It's just, the crime in itself is horrendous. Okay. The person that was killed, her name was Beverly Gertin or something like that. If I pronounced it right, if I pronounced it wrong, I'm sorry. Apparently they were a couple, and I don't know the situation, but Scott went on to rape and brutally murder this woman. And they're preaching that he's mentally ill. He should remain alive in prison to get all the counseling he needs. It's my belief that all of a sudden he was a woman because he thought that would save his life. And we've all heard stories about these transgender females in prison. There was one not long ago who was put in a prison, I believe in New Jersey, but don't quote me on that, who ended up impregnating 3 female inmates. So he was a girl to go to a women's prison. It was all lies because he was just trying to avoid a men's prison because he couldn't deal with it. So I'll go to a girl's prison. I'll do what I got to do. And he ends up getting 3 inmates pregnant. It's all nonsense. It's all ridiculous. And again, it's all mental illness. These people, yes, they need help. But they don't need clemency if they're convicted of a brutal crime and are given the death sentence. They don't need a presidential pardon for those reasons. What they need is, before they decide to commit these crimes, they need to think about the consequences they're going to face. So maybe this situation right here will give some of the criminals in our world, will make them think that, hey, you know what? If I kill somebody, maybe I can't say I'm a woman because they're still going to convict me. And chances are I'll get the death penalty, depending on what state it is. These politicians will go on and on and on, and they'll preach for justice for certain things. But we all know it's done for one reason only, and that is to garner votes from the woke people out there. They're joining the movements, they're joining their protests, they're marching with them, and it didn't work. Cori Bush does not belong in Congress. She does zero for her constituents. Excuse me. Again, she was one of the biggest politicians to call to defund the police, then went on to, again, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on private security. And then she came out in support of Scott Amber McLaughlin because she figured if she could stop that execution, think of the votes that she would get from the LGBTQ community. That's all it's about. It's not about caring. They don't care. They don't care. They didn't care about Scott. They don't care about Amber. All they care about is keeping themselves relevant by talking about this and hoping that next time the election rolls around, they'll be reelected. Because I'm pretty sure that if Scott did not become Amber, no one, 0 people would have been asking for clemency. Nobody. He was a brutal killer. He got what he deserved, and not one politician, not even the woke politicians, would have been knocking on the governor's door or knocking on Biden's door saying, please give him clemency. He's mentally ill. Oh no, he's only mentally ill now because he's a transgender woman. So he needs to be saved. No, he doesn't. He got what he deserved. These politicians are ridiculous, and they need to start supporting their constituents that live in these crime-ridden districts that these politicians so-called care about, because they don't care about anything but filling their pockets with money and jumping on board all these ridiculous movements just to stay relevant and just to garner votes. And that's it. And that's my opinion. If you haven't already liked this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell. Please share my videos with someone. I really appreciate that. I hope everybody's healthy and safe, and I'll see you soon with something else. Have a great night.